Hi, I'm Joe Ward of Boxer Shorts Media, and I want to gauge how you feel about people cheating the CERB. Now, recently in Saltwire, there was an article about a woman who was on a pension, very limited income, around $1,500 a month. Someone encouraged her to sign up for the CERB. Of course, she was ineligible for that, but did so anyway. She received somewhere in the neighborhood of about $10,000 worth of money. When it finally caught up with her, the government has garnished her pension and is taking about $800 off each month, which makes it very difficult for her to live. So I'll start by saying this. Regardless of whether or not a person cheated the system, if they don't have an income, they have to be supported somehow. Cutting her pension in half obviously isn't going to work. It's what they're doing right now, so I don't know if they'll change that, but it's be very difficult. So probably the only solution I foresee is to actually cut that back and reclaim the CERB funding from her and others like her a little slower, which will still constrain a very limited household income, but won't completely devastate her. Now we have to talk about why it is that people actually cheated the CERB. One was that it was so easy to do, but we'll talk about that in a bit and the government's responsibility in all of this. But for starters, the idea of cheating to get an income is correlated with this region, Cape Breton, specifically the CBRM where I focus, the level of disparity in income. So the medium income is lower than the provincial average. We know there's over 30% of households with children that are living in poverty, and of course there's senior poverty as well. So what happens when you're in a local economy that has these financial struggles for so many is that people naturally have to survive and adapt, and one of those adaptations is figuring out how to game the system, whether that be buying stamps, partners claiming single status, using that to increase child benefit or social assistance. So there's basically various ways that people have adapted to be able to get money out of the system in order to survive. And we can claim that it's greed. I think a lot of the times it's actually desperation. I think it's somewhat less likely, although not completely ruled out, that people that have a good income and a lot of resources flowing into them are much less inclined, or at least much less motivated, to actually find ways to cheat the system that could get them in some kind of trouble. So if you're on very limited income and you really struggle in this region and there's no clear path forward for you on how you're going to get more money, when a program comes along that even if you realize you're ineligible for it, a lot of people might be so tempted that they jump in and claim it, and they think, well, you know what, the onus is on the government. If I put in my information and they sent me this money, then it must mean that I am eligible, and we'll find out later. Now the finding out later becomes the problem, because in this lady's case and others like her, the pace at which they claw back that money is so fast that it's going to seriously harm her financially. I actually think it would be really easy to blame the government here, but we really have to keep things in context. And so it's like this. First of all, does the government do anything quickly? Ask somebody that works at the local citizenship department and ask about whether they themselves or their colleagues experienced a delay in getting their paycheck, like way beyond what would be ordinary when starting a job. There's all kinds of circumstances like that where the government is just extremely slow in processing anything. So when you have to roll out something quickly for something as severe as a pandemic that has changed the entire face of the world in an unprecedented way, at least in the lifetime of many today, they have to do it quickly. And the only way sort of to do that seemed to be to deploy it in such a manner that the typical safeguards that they would impose that would make that process tedious had to be stripped down. So what they did, they took the gamble that people would basically understand the criteria and would submit their information and get that flowing back to them, and that there would be a lower level of fraud. They of course had to anticipate that there were going to be people that would exploit that system. Perhaps they didn't realize the degree to which that might be done and how much it would ultimately cost the government, and how difficult it would be to claw all that money back. So given that a government system is so slow and tedious, I have to sort of believe that the way they deployed the CERB was the way they had to. But there are unintended consequences of everything we do. No matter how well studied a system you look at it, there's always going to be something that you don't conceive. In this case, they could have conceived of it, perhaps not to the extent. Ultimately, whatever the reason for it was, whether or not it could have been prevented, if there was a better way to approach it. The situation that we're in now is that many people that have very limited incomes are going to be in a situation where that money they have to pay back. And I think they do have to pay that money back. There will be cases where it wasn't done in pure ignorance and it was done to manipulate the system and get access to that cash. They will have to pay it back. But we're going to have to decide if we can completely financially break them, because it really doesn't do us any good to have someone lose an apartment because they can't afford to pay the rent. And all that does is shuttles them over to another part of our system. So if you suddenly are kicked out and you don't have enough income to live, you're going to have to rely on other aspects of social services. So for me, the people that did that and should have known better, why did you do that, really? But I understand that a state of economic desperation in this region and the cultural sort of formation of similar tactics that are done sort of leads people down that path, unfortunately. But the blame can't entirely be on the government, because we did need the rapid deployment of the CERB, all other criticisms of that program aside, to be quick and get that funding to the people that need it. So now tell me what you think in the comments.